It's called a 𝗧𝘅𝗶, actually. That is true.
Beg your pardon?
𝗧𝘅𝗶, yeah. Freight operating company, you know. Well, you guys are service level adapter, and you know he's got a race, a Mercedes Vito or whatever down. He had a Vito down the hard shoulder. He was on the hard shoulder. Ian was plastered to the side window of the 𝗧𝗅𝗶. You're not what you call a vocational driver, are you, Dave?
Hi, I'm David Hunter and welcome to Taxi Talk. You're joining us. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me, we have 𝗧𝗅𝗶.
Hello again.
Excellent. And a thinner version of David Goldring.
Yes, much less of me, and most people like that quite a lot.
Yeah, excellent. So David joins us today. We're going to be talking about his experience in the industry. We're going to be talking about network, aggregation of jobs, and possibly the outlook for the future. Where is the industry moving to? You've been in the industry, what, man and boy?
Yeah, well, probably coming up to 20 years now.
20 years.
Yeah,
and I'm detecting from the accent that you're from Coventry.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
You're from Liverpool.
I am. I'm from Liverpool.
Is that where the journey started?
Yeah, born and raised. Yeah, in Liverpool.
Excellent.
There's been a lot of stops along the way. From LA to Miami to northern British Columbia to lots of other places we can't even discuss where I've been or might not have been.
I'm sure we have a segment later where we do true or false. You can bring a story forward and we can guess whether it's true or false.
Yeah.
So I want to know how did you step foot in the industry? Mm-hmm. How did you fall into becoming a network expert and working for all these big aggregators?
Well, really, my journey into private hire, probably like a lot of people's, was almost an accident. I'm actually a sound engineer by trade, acoustics engineer, and I had a very successful acoustics business up until the financial crash, when all of a sudden my customers dried up overnight and I needed...
When was that, about 2008?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I'd gone from doing very well indeed, actually, and
living the rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah, living the rock and roll lifestyle. To be honest, I actually ran my business most of the time from Portugal, where I realised that the products that we were making could just be picked up and drop shipped from where they were made, which was actually 𝗘𝗅𝗏 just up the road. And it was collected. So unfortunately, I needed to get a proper job, and I reached out to a good friend of mine, a guy, 𝗘𝗅𝗽𝗏, that probably a lot of people in the industry know, and they probably know his brother Chris, and they own...
Do you follow?
Yeah, do you follow? They followed they obviously, their father had left them David Goldring taxis, and they worked in it, man and boy themselves. And obviously they owned Wirral satellite cars, they owned David Goldring, and they owned this burgeoning new thing that they'd got, which called 𝗘𝗏𝗏, which kind of had come from the ashes of free phone taxis. The idea of having a phone number that works all over the country, 0800 33 2211 or whatever. All of a sudden, geographic dialing had gone, mobile phones had killed that. But what they did have was a very large pot of suppliers who'd signed up to be part of this. And these guys were, just before my time, some of them were turned into 𝗘𝗏𝗏 suppliers. And literally in the week I joined 𝗘𝗏𝗏, they just won the tender for what is now DB Cargo, what was DB Schenker.
Is that moving freight around the country?
Huge freight train. It's called a 𝗧𝘅𝗶, actually. That is true.
Beg your pardon?
𝗧𝘅𝗶, freight operating company, and the other one, 𝗃𝗄, train operating company, and they'd won that particular contract, and it was huge. And they'd realised it was going to eat them alive, because we're talking about something that was... They had no systems to do it. It was 12.
What was that contract worth, do you think, in monetary?
It's about 6 to 7 million a year.
Wow.
And that's going back that far. So it was a lot of money. And it's 2,000 freight train drivers moving 24/7, 365. And I mean, all day, every day.
So back in, let's try and think. So back in those days, most firms probably weren't computerized.
No, well, I mean, there was a bit. We were in there. I mean, Riga, etc.
The larger firms, but I'm saying, a little firm in Spalding or Market Harbour.
Well, listen, my first, the biggest shock I've ever. We had a supplier actually who used to look after Peak Forest Depot, which is obviously in the Peak District or whatever near Buxton. And I walked in, and the way that they gave out their jobs, they had what can only be described as a tombola with balls in it, yeah, and then a big grid, big square wooden grid, and the job would go down on the grid, they'd roll the ball, out would come the ball, number 2, and that was car number 2, and that would be his job. So it was like basically dispatched by random, and everybody got a fair chance. The bizarre thing is, actually, I think the drivers liked it more than screwed by a controller. It was just basically they were either going to get it or they weren't.
You can't be accused of running a corrupt buck, can you?
No, not really. But they were doing about,
lottery.
They did about 30k a month. You know what I mean, of this work, and these drivers pretty much that's because realistically, the way they actually did their business, I mean, you could crawl the 200 yards home from the pub basically. So there wasn't a lot of that kind of trade. But these guys were moving all day, moving train drivers backwards and forwards between depots and whatever, and so it was the infancy of it all, and you know, I started off realistically. I was doing the looking after the invoice, to be fair, which really meant, you know, hundreds of invoices coming in from operators all over the country. I'm pretty much doing an audit on this thing every month,
making sure the jobs on the invoices had gone ahead.
Exactly, making sure the jobs had gone ahead, making sure there was no doubling up, making sure the leading miles were correct.
So rolling on a few more years. What was peak 𝗘𝗃𝗏 like? You know, when it found its feet and it was established.
Well, peak 𝗘𝗏 got to the point where obviously we'd grown the network, and we had, by that time we had 7 train operating companies: Virgin Trains, First Trans Pennine, First Great Western, ScotRail, First Capital Connect. We had GB Rail Freight. We had National Express. So I sort of transitioned from being very much I knew all of the suppliers, so from doing the invoices, to be fair, I was the one that spoke to them all. So in the end I ended up knowing everybody, and that made me the sort of natural, well, you know, you better deal with all the supplier relations stuff. So I did that for a few years, and then I sort of, I'll be totally honest, I wanted more money, and they were like, if you want more money, then you're going to have to go and earn your keep. So I became head of business development at 𝗘𝗏, and some people that came up behind me, I mean, like Roger Jago is obviously, you know, now global head of procurement and supply at 𝗓𝗏. Has been one of my best mate, you know what I mean, and has been and continues to be. But a lot of the people that were in there at 𝗘𝗏 at the time, Pete Andrews, Roger Jago, they became, Danny, for instance, who works at Journey, you know, they came up and were sort of mostly went into supply relations and whatever, and worked with me, and so peak 𝗘𝗏 was exciting, and the growth was immense. We went from sort of 6 million quid to about 22 million, I think.
And obviously the internet, and as more operators got involved in digital, that made it run more efficiently, more profitably.
And it did. It was, and to the point where we realised, truthfully, that we needed it in order to get all of this work into systems without error. Because one of the biggest problems was that a 6:10 becomes a 10:06 job, and you've got a train driver sitting there, and the fine is £5,000 or whatever for not picking, you know. And
really,
it's like,
it was that high?
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, basically, trains it was like £1,000 a minute or something like that. So after like 5 minutes, the reason trains get cancelled is because it's no longer viable to run the train. It's just like, forget it.
Because of the fines you're running late.
We're not going to make any money.
It's easier to cut your losses
and off you go.
Yeah.
So basically, we realised that API integration was the way forward. So I got the job of going out there and trying to beat 𝗧𝘅𝗶 and 𝗧𝘅𝗶.
Who's 𝗧𝘅𝗶 and 𝗧𝘅𝗶?
Because I'm going to say, for the people that don't know, what's API?
What's it? Automatic protocol. I don't even know what it stands for anymore.
It's basically the gateway between two software.
It's effectively a...
So 𝗧𝘅𝗶, and they were part of AutoCAD, weren't they? Which is a dispatch software.
Literally joined AutoCAD was essentially a deathbed legacy from 𝗪𝗏, Hassan's father, and 𝗧𝘅𝗶 is, if I'm hopefully get the relationship right, but I think he's married to 𝗪𝗏's sister or something. But I mean, he was obviously very successful in his own right, telecommunications, hotels, and he's quite an astute guy. Obviously, we know this. And 𝗧𝘅𝗶 had just sort of joined and was, you know, and I was trying to talk 𝗧𝘅𝗶 into giving us an API integration, and you know, well, you guys are service level adapter, and you know, that's you know, this whole sort of what it was and what we were, and the fact that we provide network and we look after the customers. A lot of people don't really realise quite what goes into aggregation. They just think that somehow or other you're
it's a lot of relations pulling strings together. So you've got a relationship with the DMS, like AutoCab, or whatever's around, that's trying to convince them.
Big jigsaw puzzle.
That it's a benefit to the operator driver by getting more jobs in. Because it's very short, Pada. So what happened to 𝗘𝗏? Where is it now?
Well, 𝗘𝗏, essentially, really, in my my last few weeks at 𝗘𝗏, I'd been, they were bought by Transdev, which started off from, I got a phone call from a guy called 𝗘𝗏𝗏𝗏, who was at 𝗔𝗟𝗘𝗥𝗧, he was a lawyer, and he was like, look, you know, we're kind of interested, but don't tell anybody yet, just want to find out what it's all about. Can you get me an account? So I gave Tom an account and had conversations on a regular basis with him about what we were doing, and he was using 𝗘𝗏 and he liked it. And then basically they were owned by an enormous, I mean, you know, Transdev is a huge French operation. They own Veolia and 67 light railways around the world, and they employ 250,000 people or something. And it was like they wanted to buy 𝗘𝗏. So 𝗘𝗏 ended up getting bought by them. And
for zillions and millions of dollars.
For a few
so Tim and Chris were set up for life, off they went.
They were, but sadly no payout for me. So I must admit, I'd been approached a little bit before then by a mate of mine, 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏, who is now head of enterprise sales at Get. But at the time, Paul had been, he'd been the commercial director of 𝗔𝗟𝗘𝗥𝗧, he'd been the head of sales at Addison Lee for its massive growth period. Him and Mike Tobin, they were all
because they were also going into the network.
They were the. So I mean, I'd worked on him with the emergency contingency planning for Euston Station, and I knew him well. And Addison Lee were basically a massive supplier to 𝗘𝗏. We realised with that London hub in the middle of it that actually we could do the rest of the country, but having somebody as strong as Adley in the middle of town, but you could go out and get.
What about service levels? So obviously Adley, with its brand and its ethos, had a service level. But what about ABC cars in the middle of nowhere?
Well, that was really in my time.
With a driver turning up in the shell suit in an old Mondeo compared to...
I've had some incredible where suppliers, and that was really my gig after working in accounts.
Obviously, the corporate's expectation, well, we get that in London. How come we're not getting that in Spalding?
I've had everything from, you know, ITV news presenters going, why aren't I getting a blacked out Galaxy? You know what I mean? Imbued at 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Cornwall, and it's like, look, this is what we get you here. But there are some incredible differences even throughout the UK. But my job was obviously to try to be the carrot and the stick sometimes, and it would be like, are you sitting comfortably? Because it's not fucking carrot day, it's the other day.
And also there's different structures with operators, because some operators like Adley would have operated their own fleet, so they could set the standard. But the model outside of London can be very different. It could be like an operator with a load of driver owners. They're just chucking work at them and hoping it sticks.
That the operator is the driver, and that provides interesting situations when he's decided to. We had a guy that was in Somerset somewhere, basically, and he was a very small supplier, and he drove as well, and he had picked up a first Great Western train driver in his Tornado or something, and he had his nephew in the front. He was going to give him a lift to Bristol or something, and he had this train driver who's like, what the hell am I doing in here with the, you know what I mean? And he decides that he's going to race a Mercedes Vito or whatever down. He had a Vito down the hard shoulder. He was on the hard shoulder of the slip road onto the M5 or whatever, and like 110 mile an hour down the slip road racing this guy. So I mean, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You've got to. Obviously, the client comes back to you and goes, "Never ever use them again." And it's like, what am I going to make? Really sorry about this, but you've kind of done it to yourself.
The scary thing is you're dealing with individuals, personalities, different cultures, different areas. Do you think robo-taxis are going to change that, because there is no personality behind the wheel? It's an algorithm.
I think that where we are with autonomous and whatever, I do genuinely believe that we're a long way away from it really being completely pervasive in the industry.
Even in the States where you've had Waymo.
Listen, if
Waymo only doing like California, Austin and so on.
If you're working Milton Keynes,
Yes.
But if you're working anywhere that isn't a full boulevard grid system place, if you look at the architecture of of Victorian London, do you know what I mean? Can you imagine something that's like even if it's dripping in LiDAR arrays, until you've got the internet of everything and wearable technology where literally stepping on the road tells the road that you're in the road so the car won't kill you. Because if you look at Cannon Street or the Embankment at like 8 o'clock in the morning, got 28, I used to cycle down there, got 28,000 lemmings all ready to step out off the curb at any given time. So if you think that like technology is going to save
and it only takes because we all know from our phones, some of these, especially in London, Waze will stop working just because.
Oh totally. But I mean, satellite, GPS, it doesn't get it everywhere. So, in a lot of cities, it's not going to happen. And I think in the countryside and whatever, where I do believe that
it's creating a lot of headlines at the moment, but I think it's like anything, it's the latest thing. And we all like to get the latest thing, but it's going to take time.
There might be the idea that on motorways, we might have almost an autonomous lane where something that's got level 4 autonomous can be, you know what I mean? And the road is driving all of them. Control is handed over to whatever, and it makes much more use of the real estate basically that is the tarmac.
It'd be interesting to see. I mean, we are going out in a Waymo in a couple of weeks on this podcast. So we'll see how we get on with that. So I want to speak forward. So you worked at 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏 for a while. For those that don't remember, 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏 was this big app, along groundbreaking. Came out similar sort of time at Uber, probably a bit later, but it was an app where all operators could join, kind of a prelude to Uber Local. And they could bid for the word, basically. Huge money was thrown at that. Operators were paid to join it. Some of us were. We worked at the time in Leicester at ADT, and the student community loved it. Because there were so many giveaway vouchers. And they also worked out they could steal a card and make a card payment, So what happened there? Because it was huge, and obviously it didn't really gather. When Renault bought it, it didn't carry on.
Well, the Renault of it all came after, but when we first started, obviously I was employee number 4. And that was because I knew every supplier in the country.
So you were natural.
So when I came in to do that, and it was great because my wife had worked in print media, my new wife, and had been head of travel at the Indeed, that she'd ended up being laid off from that job, and print media was on the way down. But basically, she wanted to get back to London anyway, so it was the ideal opportunity to go to London and work in London, and took the job because on a fundamental level of what it actually did, the idea of cross-platform. Borderless sharing.
Possibly ahead of its time, really.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, look, I've been singing from the same hymn sheet now for quite a long time
about operators and dispatch systems working together.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is, and I still refuse to see that. You know what I mean? That and rightly or wrongly, but I don't really see how a dispatch system that wants to keep its customers loyal to it. I don't really see that there's any danger in actually allowing those customers to play in a network that crosses those borders.
Do you think DMS suppliers will? I mean, Bob Nixon from 𝗘𝗑𝗏, I'm sure think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, he thinks it's great. He loves me because of it. But no, me and Bob are friends and whatever. But I mean, on that ground, I still say, look, I was even talked to Chris, MD Take Me Group, this just before. Just because you can use your bank card at Lloyd's does not necessarily mean that you're going to go and get a Lloyd's account. It just goes, isn't it great? I could use my bank card every day.
And the same in any industry, whether it's booking a hotel, a flight, a car, they're all interlinked, the APIs. The problem is, that if I'm a customer and there's the taxi driver, to get to, I might have to go through multiple networks. So it goes through that one, but each one might take 50p or a percentage. With time, the customer gets that car, rather than going direct to the car, he's paid all these agency fees, which has probably multiplied the thing.
This cost per acquisition value that's in there, I maintain, is the thing that is going to be the barrier to entry. I think that ultimately, and I've said this before and put it out there really in my time, obviously at Cab Fusion, I made it very clear obviously when I was the chief commercial officer, 𝗘𝗅 Fusion, 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏, that I believed that the idea of it just being 25p to you, 25, that isn't going to, for starters, not going to float anybody's boat in terms of the value of what is that, you know, no one's going to let you own, i.e. the middleware, the central part of this that's got 800 million quid's worth of bookings going through it, and all they're getting for it's 25p a pop. So I'd always said to my lords and masters, truthfully, you know, that like, lads, if you really want this to work, a JV that puts the
joint venture
that puts the technology in the middle and allows everything to talk to everything, and that's where the value is. So everybody essentially allows work to flow through them for nothing. However, this thing that's in the middle now has massive value.
The main brain.
Yeah, the main brain.
And I suppose that to a degree brings it on to 𝗘𝗅 Fusion now. That's what it was owned by operators. 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏 there, it morphed out of 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏, but it was a bit like the Ride Group. Great personalities in the industry, formed this thing where the idea was it connects to the middleware owned by the industry. Maybe DMS could invest in it.
Exactly.
But it hasn't happened.
No.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think there's still very much a, Mick Tope, Bob Nixon, they have a very, don't put fuel in anybody else's jet. And I can see that, I can understand. You know what I mean?
The problem is, I suppose, with 𝗘𝗅𝗏, and we're not here to promote 𝗘𝗅𝗏, they've got the largest network in the UK.
Absolutely,
AutoCab, we can see are on the way down. We know lots of companies leaving it. Cab9, probably the next one in there as we record this. So they've all got their own networks. So you've got 𝗧𝗅𝗏 creating a network. We're creating a network. Lots of people. The problem is all these everyone wants to own the network.
The networks need to talk to each other.
They do. Join together.
The truth is that nobody can do it. It's all well and good going, well, we've got this and whatever. It's like, well, what are you going to do in Inverness? You got nothing. What are you going to do in Aberdeen? You got nothing. What are you going to do? It's a very big country, and there's a lot of areas where not one DMS covers it. And I still believe that that whole idea, when Phil and Joe and SD and bought 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗏, as it were, they didn't buy it because they thought that like the battle of DMS, i.e. being the biggest market share in DMS, is the future. It wasn't that at all. It was the fact that basically it had a tech team that was very adept at building mobility software, and it could be repurposed for that.
Great team.
Yeah, I mean, just some clever guys.
We're running a little bit out of time, but I do think there needs to be some movement in the trade with working together, and people are.
I hope there is.
Sub some of their work, we sub some of our work. We,
come together.
Come together.
Listen,
So I agree, and that's great. So rolling on, just if you a couple of sentences, where will the network go 5 years from now?
I think that, well, I hope that eventually the network does go beyond this insular sort of, one flavour of network. I believe it has to expand, and it's got to be, because all of a sudden you look at like things like, ComfortDelGro, and you look at the bit with CMAC, and you look at what's happening in Europe. For all of this stuff to talk to it, that is where the future and the power is. And I think that, you may end up in a few years. What I ultimately believe is this thing that's in the middle, it would be much better to be able to actually give, if the huge tech players come to it, if Apple comes to the table, Google comes to the table, Amazon, give them a lead and say, there you go, use this.
Well, let's call the thing in the middle the blob. So we believe in 5 years the blob will actually exist, and will be the saviour of the universe and the trade.
Maybe. I mean, I'd certainly love it to be.
What's stopping people coming together then?
Shut up.
You think?
We're out of time.
Look, they have a lot to lose. Some of them, have got, stuff. Of course, if you own the biggest market share, then why the hell do you want to give any of it away? I totally get it. You know what I mean? But for me, it's kind of a naivety to think that you can do it just with one.
Yeah.
You need more.
You do.
And I don't believe that the inherent danger is in allowing things to talk to each other. I think that you've got much more potential to lose a customer because they go, well, I want to play ball with the guy down the road and you won't let me, so I'm going to do this. So, there's that. What are you doing there?
I'm just symbolising we're out of time.
Living in a box.
Living in a box, a big brown black box. Can't beat a black box.
Right on time.
Right on time. So this is generally, we always do this for every guest. We've got some lost property in here, a real lost property that's been networked to you here.
Okay.
Just pick an item to take home to your lovely wife, Annie.
Oh, yeah.
Give it to her birthday.
I will. And this, realistically, is the least. I got one of these actually at 𝗘𝗅𝗽𝗏. They gave me one.
Is that because you're a loudmouth?
Yeah,
You don't actually need one.
Because the need for this in our house. I mean, in our where is it called? Our native tongue is screaming. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
In our house. Yeah.
So, and also before we go, we're going to play true or false. So you have to give the audience the way you give us a story.
Yeah.
It can be made up or false. Ash and I will guess whether it's true or false.
Okay.
And then the guys here in the audience behind the camera will guess whether it's true or false. True or false?
Okay, here's a little. I suppose a few years. I'm on the judging panel for the QSI Awards and for the QSI Pro Drive, etc. I know it's different flavour, but and they have had me out with some interesting. They've orchestrated situations I think that are quite funny, really. So I suppose is it a true one? They decided that it would be a great idea to put me and Ian Ferguson, who's the chairman of the Key Group and probably equally as volatile as myself, in a car together just to see what would happen.
See if you get on.
Yeah, just to see if we'd get on.
I think that's true.
Well, yeah.
Did you get on?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, we do get on. Obviously, he has a particular name for me. Can't say it on here. But I used to be a fat one. Now I'm just one. Yeah. As we're going around the roundabout, the A3, about let's say 70 miles an hour in a X5. Ian was plastered to the side window of the X5. You're not what you call a vocational driver, are you, Dave? And I was like, no, I drive for my pleasure, not yours.
Was he Welsh?
No, he wasn't Greek yet, but yeah. So that was quite funny. But mate, there's too many true stories to actually bother with any of the false ones.
So that was true.
So I'm guessing that's true, guys. What do you?
Sorry, but yeah.
True. Yeah, true.
True. I don't think you got the rules of the game. Though.
I don't. I think I got it very wrong.
Yeah. Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. A real icon of the years, a bit like Marmite. We either love you or hate it.
And try and get word.
I am gutted. I thought I was roundly loved.
No, you are right. To be honest, I could have just asked one question, walked off, had my lunch, and then come back. You'd still be going. But no, it's always interesting to listen to you. Thank you very much for taking your time to travelling up here today.
Thank you very much,
guys. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your time. We really do. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to subscribe, like, and ring that bell. And we'll be back here very soon.
Cheers,
and next week with another podcast. Dave,
Cheers, Dave.
Thank you very much.